What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Rauen, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is a talented multidisciplinary designer. She's spent over 25 years managing a variety of projects. She leads teams throughout the life of a project to bring hospitable thinking into every space she designs. She's the managing director at AvroKO's Miami studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Kimberly Jackson. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. And what I'm excited to speak to you about for many different reasons. One of which is I know so many people that left New York to move to warmer pastures. And I think you might be one of the first that I've known, always known as a New Yorker, that's now down in Miami. So I'd love to think about that and like the change that you've experienced or you're undergoing.
Right.
But also before we get into it, obviously, defining hospitality. What does hospitality mean to you?
Well, I think, when one speaks of hospitality, I think in mind of interactions and interactions with the people around you. A lot of times we solely think about hospitality spaces, whether it be hotels or restaurants, but hospitality really is a mindset. It is how you interact with your friends, your family, your colleagues, your boss, your employees. It's truly a part of your world view. And are you being hospitable to the people around you versus are you just building hospitality spaces?
So I think I'd love to pull on that a little bit as far as because in the intro I was saying how you're bringing the idea of, quote, hospitable thinking into every space that you and AvroKO at large, and through all that meteoric growth that you guys have had over the years, walk us through that idea. How does what hospitality means to you tie into that, or weaving into that idea of hospitable thinking into the projects and the teams that you're building?
Well, I think I guess we have to talk about what hospitable thinking is.
Perfect.
And so it's really an all-encompassing concept based on behavioral science and environmental psychology that talks about 4 key moments or elements. We call them the 4 S's, but it's really how the space is. It's about how it is perceived by the guest. And so the 4 S's that we talk about are security, surprise, significance, and synergy. So security, let's start there, being not necessarily, are the doors secure or anything like that, but more, are you making your guests feel comfortable? Do they feel at home? Are they relaxed? Do they feel safe in their environment so that they can kind of shrug off whatever is going on in their day and just feel comfortable? Surprise being that element of delight. You want to make sure that as people walk through your space, there are little touches that kind of catch them by surprise. Significance, making your guest really feel important, whether it be remembering their birthday, as simple as something like that, or having special spaces or locations in the space where people are elevated and they feel a little bit more significant. And then synergy, which really brings everything together and making the whole much greater than the individual parts. And for me, that means really taking a look at either these other individual parts of the 4 S's or looking at how operations, brand, the concept of the space, the built environment all come together to make the environment greater than any one piece. as well. So there's a lot of little nuances to hospitable thinking, but I think it really is the backbone to how we approach projects. And when I think about it, when I kind of extract that a little bit, it's the backbone of how I like to look at my studio here in Miami with all of my team members, and having them feel secure and significant, and filling their days with little surprises. That's also part of being hospitable and hospitable thinking.
So I'm curious, this idea of the 4 S's, where did it come up from? Who came up with that? How was that?
The AvroKO partners, actually, they are a brain trust, I must say. They have their summits, and they spend time really thinking about the work and what we do. And they came through with this idea of hospitable thinking, and it kind of blew me away, actually, I must say.
Yeah, I'm actually quite intrigued, and especially because I guess there's a lot of things that I find as like a fanboy of AvroKO, and having known you guys, maybe not since the beginning, but kind of close.
Mhm.
What makes you guys, AvroKO, unique also, I think, is aside from just like the amazing aesthetic and incorporating these 4 S's into every project, AvroKO is also owner operator in a lot of different restaurants and bars. So it's like, and it's almost as if they're investing, and I say you guys are investing your blood, sweat, tears, and capital into creating these laboratories of hospitality. And it's interesting that those 4 S's were kind of have distilled to the top of them, so to speak. And as you were recounting security, surprise, significance, and synergy, my brain was just going back to all of the different places, AvroKO restaurants and bars that I've been to, and just really thinking about each of those. And I was like, oh wow, they do check the boxes on all of on all the on all the spaces.
I think that, I think because there is the background of ownership and operations, a lot of this kind of was distilled from that as well. Just understanding the guests in a different way than just designing the spaces, but really thinking about hospitality as a whole. From the design to, or even before that, from location to design to planning to operations, to really just taking ownership of the space.
And as we were talking about all of those, for some reason, my brain keeps going back to public,
Yeah.
because I feel like that, well, all of the places that I've been to, and I think I've been to almost all of them, all of that is resonating with me in a major way. But as I'm thinking about, like, I've had some just incredible memories at public in particular, and it does check all of those boxes. And it's interesting how, not just from the built environment, that they're incorporating those 4 S's, but also I'd love to hear about, and I'm very intrigued by how you're doing that as you guys expand, because, obviously New York, San Francisco, now you're down in Miami. Where else are you? And like, how are you taking those 4 S's into your places of work?
We're also in London, and
Oh,
we're
and
also in Bangkok.
oh, wow.
So we've 5 studios now, all over the world. So we cover pretty much every corner of the world at this point in time, which is wonderful. But I think each studio has its own managing director, and we action these items in our own studios in different ways. Although we are still each of us a part of the whole. All the managing directors talk all the time. We actually become fairly close over the years. I've known some of these guys for 11 years. So, we've all kind of come up with AvroKO, a bunch of us. So each of us really takes these ideas and, like I said, actions them a little bit differently in each studio, but we want to make sure that the culture of AvroKO really is hospitable. That's one of our main tenets in our kind of cultural manifesto, if I must say, is we are hospitable. And these are little pieces of what that means.
And aside from being hospitable as a team and a group in the 5 different offices, it's manifesting in a way of, winning design firm of the year, working on all these incredible projects. And it seems like I don't know. When I walk into an AvroKO space, I'm like, oh, is this AvroKO? Right? There's a feeling of it, but it's not, but it's also so varied. So
Yeah.
is there is there a methodology, or it just kind of happens where those 4 S's get incorporated, not just into the teams and the offices that you're building, but also into the projects? Like, is there a thread that ties them all together?
I mean, obviously each of the studios have their regional variations. A project out of Bangkok is not necessarily going to look exactly the same as a project out of Miami or New York, for that matter. But at the same time, because AvroKO has really come from this operational side as well as the design side, we do think about these, whether it's consciously at the top of our mind saying, okay, here are the 4 S's, we need to make sure we're doing that, or just out of a method of trying to create spaces that are hospitable. And I think this foundation is there, but if you're truly thinking about your guest in a manner to be the most hospitable, some of this comes naturally.
I think hearing you say that and thinking about my experiences of being in an AvroKO hotel or restaurant, okay, I get the security, I get the significance, I get the synergy, but I do think somehow you guys are really excellent at incorporating that idea of surprise. And to me, if I were to like layer them all out, like the surprise one, just speaking from my experience, is like the heaviest, or the has the largest gravitational pull from my experience, because it's really, I don't know, there's always something at each of these properties that really just surprises me. And it's not like it's slamming you in the face. There's like this subtle but powerful surprise. And that's got to be like a really difficult balance to achieve on a project.
It is. I think that that's something that I know we consciously do. It's usually top of mind. Okay, what is it about this project that is going to push the boundary a little bit, that's going to surprise, as you said, the guests, or even, the ownership team? How can we throw something in there that's a little out of left field? It's also built into our design process a little bit, in the way that we start our narratives and our concepts. We always look for that one extra little thing on the side that we can layer into our narratives, to make that a driving force of how we design going forward. So it starts from the very, very beginning.
So then I'd actually love to dig into that a little bit, because you also have a branding company, a branding agency, a creative, I don't know whatever you want to call it. It's a brand bureau, right?
Correct.
And you're working on so many different projects. It's not oftentimes brand bureau is not the first on board to set up the pillars of the brand. And sometimes they are, but when you're really establishing that narrative, is there a difference between when you guys do it yourself from brand bureau level to working with a third party branding agency, or sometimes I'm sure there's just not even, you're just going into the project? Like, is there a difference in how you establish that narrative, and is there a preference?
Yeah, I think the narrative that I'm speaking of is really about the specific space. And that typically comes from the interior design team. When we're looking at Brand Bureau, whether we're looking at their strategy department, who are really creating that grounding for a brand, I think that's quite different, because then you're talking about a brand narrative and a brand strategy. What I mean is a specific spatial strategy. and a spatial narrative for each design that we go into.
Understood.
And then we also do work, we do have, our brand bureau does have a graphics team that then would come in and does some of the environmental graphics and the branding as far as a brand stamp or logo, the brand fonts and things like that. And sometimes they will pull that from, if it's an existing brand that they need to change, they'll look at those tenants, or they'll look at our original design narrative and kind of take cues from the interior design narrative as well. So we both work in different streams, but when we're working together, we try to collaborate and bring a single idea, but from two different sides.
And, time being the most valuable asset all of us have, is there a difference in a project makeup or timing or efficiency or power where you guys are doing, where brand bureau and AvroKO are involved at the same time? Like, do you feel a difference in that? And then what would that be?
I do. It's actually, I've worked on a couple of projects with brand bureau where we started together at ground zero. It's really exhilarating. They have a different process than we do, obviously, from the interior design side, especially the strategy team. And when those two sides get together, whether it's, the strategist working on the overarching kind of strategy for the ownership team, and then they have with that a powerhouse senior designer, interior designer who can reinforce but have their own narrative as far as how the architecture is coming together. I think those two things aligned from the beginning just creates such a powerful moment in both environmental space and just mental space, where you're watching these two teams create things like a giant brand book or a complete strategy guide for an entire complex of buildings and spaces and just hospitality, a giant hospitality region. So it's really neat to see that come together. Alternatively, when the ID team is designing a space for a particular owner and having brand bureau come in and do the environmental graphics and things like that, it's also really neat to work with them in that manner as well. It's really great having a sister company that can kind of fill both roles with you alongside of you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because like anecdotally more and more I go, going to conferences, and I've always known the importance of the idea of brand, especially in the independent world. Okay. I've always understood the importance of brand, but I had always assumed, okay, yeah, I'm sure there's a branding company, but more often than not, I would think that interior design would drive really what that space wants to be. But I've been hearing more and more success stories of ownership groups in the independent space who bring on a branding agency at the very beginning to just really set it up and create the pillars and like the super high level, the top of the pyramid, if you will, about what's trying to be accomplished. And then that disseminates amongst architecture, interior design, I don't know, from kitchen equipment to just mechanical, like it just rolls all downhill and creates like a more well, what I would think would be, from what I've been hearing and how people have been waxing on and on about it, just a more aligned experience from the beginning.
Well, I think that depends on the type of space you're crafting. Really, if it's a brand that is kind of spatial heavy with their brand, this is the brand, these are the graphics you're going to see, these are the colors we're going to use, this is how the interiors will be across the entire brand. That's one thing, and it works very well that way when you start with the branding company to set that all up. If it's a brand that has more individuality with spaces, they might have their brand tenants, their brand strategy. They're looking at who their consumer, their customer mix is. They're really kind of planning all of that out, as well as their brand logo, the graphics, and everything. If their spaces are more individualized, I think that's where AvroKO typically comes in with our narrative for each individual space. Because then each space can be crafted in a way that doesn't fight with the brand, but sets up an individual hospitable space that has its own narrative and has its own identity.
Yeah. And it's more in alignment with that fourth S of synergy, right?
Yeah,
Maybe that's where I was
exactly.
trying to go. I feel like it really creates a more cohesive experience that, and also if done, like when you have all this surprise in the projects that you're working in, it's not like you're getting hit in the face with the surprise, so to speak, right? There's like a subtlety about you there, and it's like, oh wow, like there's a glow. I feel like all the AvroKO projects I've ever been into, there's just like this glowing feel that I get in there. Does that make sense?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. I felt the same way before I started working at AvroKO. And I still do. I'll go into a space now and go, yep, we did this. And this is, I can see the mark and the history of, how AvroKO has developed over the years in design. And you can see that coming through projects very clearly.
Well, I've also heard you say a couple of times, talking about the team and just as you're growing into these 5 different offices, I would assume recruiting and finding people to join your team in all the different in the 5 different cities, it must be challenging to find the right kind of person that can embrace those 4 S's and hospitable thinking. It's kind of like that Danny Meyer, the what does he call it? The hospitality quotient, right? There's a I'm curious, how do you as you're recruiting and growing, how do you find and attract those people that you have those synergies with?
It takes a lot of effort. I just went through a recruiting effort here in Miami just recently. And, it is remarkable. There actually are really good candidates out there. And, finding them, making sure they've got that hospitality drive. That's
Mhm.
one thing. Are they driven to really be hospitable through their work and through their interconnections with the team? That's really important to me. And so it takes a little bunch of interviewing and a bunch of portfolio rustling, but there are really good candidates out there who have come through school seeing hospitality firms, putting out such amazing projects.
Mm.
I'm not just going to say AvroKO. There are other firms out there putting out great projects too. But I think it's inspiring to that next generation, seeing projects come forth that are just make people feel special, significant,
Mm.
and that then breeds a different type of designer who really want to focus on hospitality.
So I've heard you say it just now, like being special and significant. And you said earlier, this kind of, it's not a zero sum game, but really like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Mhm.
And I think that's a very difficult balance to attract, achieve, maintain, and grow into. Um, Having been in New York, and I'm sure you visited other offices of or other offices of AvroKO as well. What's the most exciting part about building the team and infrastructure that you're experiencing in Miami?
Um, the most exciting part really is, I guess, seeing the joy in people to when they truly kind of embrace being a part of AvroKO, which usually happens right away, which is good. But it's really exciting to inspire the next generation of AvroKO designers, senior designer, the next gen of the senior designers, the design directors, the managing directors of the world are, people in our studios right now. And that's exciting to be able to mentor and help foster them.
And for you personally, how do you deal with the humidity?
Well, I've I went to high school in New Orleans, and I swore I was never going to deal with the humidity again, and here I am.
Oh my gosh, where'd you go wrong?
I know exactly. I think spending 20 years of New York winters
Mm.
is kind of like, yeah, maybe I can deal with the humidity a little bit more. Yeah.
And if you think about the coming up through the New York office at AvroKO over, what is it, 11 years?
Yeah.
Um, what do you miss most about the mothership in New York?
The people.
The people.
Luckily, we all stay in touch. The offices, as I mentioned earlier, are really interconnected, and of course, with Miami and New York being in the same time zone, we are very interconnected. With our global team is still in New York, so our technical direction, our finance team, our HR team, they're all in New York, and so we talk all the time, which is great. But yes, there's some, individual folks who I kind of came up with in AvroKO are still back in New York. So,
Mm. And then how often are you getting up there, and are other people looking to escape from New York to come down like in the depths of winter to get some remote work done?
yeah, I've had a couple of requests, yes, and definitely we've had some visits by some like our C team have come down to do visits, business, which is great, but also they choose the timing of their visits very carefully. So I get more visits between December and February than I typically do any other time of the year. But but no, people are coming down to say hello, and I get up to New York at least a couple of times a year. If not for conferences, and then just stop by the studio just to go up and we have our associate summit up in New York and things like that. So I
Mm.
do get to go back up and say hello and wander around the city for a couple of days.
Wonderful. Yeah. You gotta get plugged in back up there in the cold. Um,
That usually is not during the winter.
oh, okay. Hopefully not in the summer either, because then
Oh, there's
you
that
can't
too.
escape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so one other thing that I've noticed about you in particular is we're all so busy. Everyone's most valuable asset is the time that they have in the day outside of sleeping, right? And we have to be
Right.
very intentional about how we allocate our efforts there. So obviously, you've moved to Florida, you're building an office and a great team and working on really cool projects, some of which, or many of which you can't talk about because they're like being birthed right now, so to speak.
Right.
But I was also struck, not surprised, but struck, because I know it must take a lot of time and you really believe in this. But tell us about HDAC, the Hospitality Design
Ah.
Action Council, because I think you were like one of the founding charter leaders of it. And what drew you to it? Like, how do you like? And it's a really awesome group of people. And like, what drew you to that? And like, as busy as you are.
It's interesting. Everybody's busy, right? But HDAC, Hospitality Diversity Action Council. It was started as a group of individuals there was one particular person, Stacy, Shoemaker, who reached out to many in the industry, in hospitality, and she wanted to start this council. There was a small core group of us that really we just started meeting and talking about how we could better the efforts in the hospitality industry of creating a more diverse industry for everybody at all levels. And it just grew from there. I am on the board of that. There are several board members. We've expanded quite a bit. We started a membership committee. We've got a mentorship committee. We've got all sorts of things going on to really get our nonprofit organization set up so that we can really launch this to the world. We've been doing events at HD Expo and BDNY. We've been doing talks and panels and things like that just to bring more attention to the idea of having a more diverse hospitality industry, which is, it's really important. I know there's a lot going on in the news right now about, DEI and kind of pushed back against DEI efforts and things like that. But I think this is something that's incredibly important for our industry, just in the way that we need to have a diverse industry in order to create more diverse and hospitable. I'll stick that word under there again, hospitable spaces. The more diverse we are, the more diverse people feel comfortable in our spaces, because we can craft what makes more people feel comfortable.
And I'd also say that embracing diversity or giving your headspace for diversity in anything, racial, religious,
Yeah, exactly.
economic, age related, it goes back to what you were saying a couple of times, where it's that idea that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that's really what it's all about, because if, as humans, we have such a varied, like, we're all human, but we have such a varied life experience that we can all learn from it. And again, that's also one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast, because I get to talk to like really incredible people from every different kind of walk of life. And I don't know, it just make it, like, as a curious human, it rounds out my life experience that I can share with my kids and friends and family.
Yeah.
And I think just allocating more time to thinking about that, and giving space to that it's huge, and it will only pay dividends for everyone.
What's really exciting about HDAC is that it's not just Council of Designers. It's not focused on one part of the industry, as in interior design, which is where I kind of live, breathe, and work. But it's also made up of people who are investors. It's made up of people who are owners. They have their own hospitality groups. There are, it's just hospitality as an industry as a whole, encompassing all aspects of the hospitality industry, not just one section of it. And so to have all of these diverse voices in all sectors of the industry is really amazing to understand the different challenges each sector has. And it actually makes me a better person within the hospitality industry, because I actually understand a bit more about what this challenge is over here and what that challenge is over there. I think it's a great group of people to kind of put together and to know.
And I'm glad you mentioned Stacy's name, Stacy Shoemaker, Rauen, because I just want to also give her a shout out, because
she's awesome.
She really saved me last week. I was at the HD Summit up in Vail. I was supposed to lead a group of skiers, as I do many years, but I woke up at like 2 a.m, being up at high altitude. I couldn't think. My brain, it felt like an ice pick was going through. I was lying down on the bathroom floor, just getting cold, like trying to get cool, but I wasn't sick. I was just extremely dehydrated. So I let someone know I couldn't lead. I let Keisha know. And then somehow Stacy heard about it, and she texted me, a mobile IV nurse company person who basically came to my room and poked me full of like saline and vitamin B and all this other stuff. And then I was like a rock star for the rest of the night. But she really made me feel very comfortable and kind of helped me save that trip. So I just want to give Stacy a huge shout out. She really helped out a man in need.
Oh, that's awesome.
When you think about the idea of, I'll dig into some more of those S's that we didn't talk about so much.
Sure.
Maybe like the idea of synergy and security, really being, I guess, making everyone feel comfortable, and then finding synergy. What's a good example of a project that you've worked on in the past that kind of brings those front and center, that I could put photos up, but like, what was it about those two, the security and the synergy, that you think can be experienced in the built environment?
Security, it can be as simple as making sure from an interior design point of view, making sure you're not putting people in a major path of travel. That never makes anybody feel comfortable or secure. If they're sitting on a small stool and they're kind of in a giant aisle of people walking behind them constantly. So there are many levels to security that you can talk about. That's like the smallest, that's, if you're going to achieve something in security, that's the smallest amount you can achieve right there. And there are other ways of doing that. Synergy, I think, to me, and I think maybe everybody might think about this a little bit differently. For me, the idea of synergy is truly making sure that all of the pieces of the environment, not just the interior design, but, we've crafted a space where the servers can easily traverse and get around, and they feel comfortable and secure, where the kitchen staff can come in and out and they feel comfortable and secure. There's the interaction with people getting up and walking around versus the hosts kind of leading people through it, just everything working together in a way that the entire experience is one that is just, it puts you in another place.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not just the people who are paying to be there, it's also the people working there on their career path or how they're making ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an example? Like, does one of the projects that you've worked on or that AvroKO's worked on kind of exemplify that in a meaningful way to you? I'm sure they all do, but like, is there something one of them that jumps off the page at you?
I think it's interesting to you mentioned public, and I also think back to Saxon and Parole. It's one where I actually knew individuals who worked at Saxon and Parole, and they always talked about it being an easy space and an easy environment to understand, to work in, that flowed very nicely for them. They actually really enjoyed their experience there. And that's something where not only the guests can enjoy the experience of the space, but the employees actually enjoy the experience of the space, making them comfortable. I think that's a really big win for interior design.
And then I remember the surprise there. There was a door in the back you'd go through. What was the name of that bar? It was like behind the...
It went through 2 iterations. It was Madame Geneva for a while, and then Ghost Donkey. It was the first Ghost Donkey.
Wow. And where's Ghost Donkey expanded to?
Denver, Vegas. There was one in Auckland, and I'm not quite sure if it's still there.
Okay.
We do have a few. It's really exciting to see that brand take off.
Who came up with the name for Ghost Donkey? Because that's like one of the greatest names ever.
I'm not sure which one of the founding partners, but one of them did, or all of them at the same time, because that's how they work, which is awesome.
I'd like to believe it was all of them at the same time.
Like I do
they were
too,
around,
actually.
And they're just like, Ghost. They all 4 of them said it at the same time.
All in the
Ghost
same
Donkey. And then they all said, Jinx, can't talk till I say your name.
Exactly.
You mentioned that you went to high school in New Orleans. Did you grow up in Louisiana?
I did not grow up in Louisiana. I was in Louisiana only for 3 years, but both sides of my family, my mom and my dad's side of the family, are all rooted from Louisiana.
Cool. And then you went up to Cambridge. It's in Cambridge, right? Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I think I've shared this before, but I did a 3-year entrepreneurial program up at MIT, and I bought a shirt, and I could never wear the shirt because whenever I would look in a mirror, it would say Tim, and it just upset me because I'm Dan. I'm not Tim. Do you have the same issue?
I don't. Although it is really funny.
I don't know why. It would just bug the shit out of me. I'm like, I'm Dan. I'm not Tim. I can't wear this.
That's really hilarious.
Yeah. As I digress.
The mascot's name is Tim, right?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Is
the
it?
beaver. The beaver's name is Tim.
I had no idea. But a beaver is a good engineer, right? They're always building dams and lodges.
Nature's first engineer. Yeah, that's it.
See, I just learned something. I had no idea. So you're down in Miami. You're building this great team. You're working on great projects. When you think and look out to the future, short, medium, long term, like what's exciting you most as you're looking out there?
Because our team in Miami is so young, and I don't mean young in age, but just we've only been here for 2 years. I want this team to grow and have a solid foundation. That's really what I'm looking forward to in the next few years, to really help nurture the team down here, and watch it do what I know it can do. So I'm excited for that. I'm also excited to see what comes out of this team, putting all of these new AvroKO thinkers together, and seeing what they can produce has been really exciting. So that's what I'm looking forward to right now.
I love it. And then actually tying this into your experience, if you go back like 11 years ago, what was it that made you say, this is the place for me?
It really was the people. And a lot of those people are still around and are kind of the foundation of our kind of design brain trust at AvroKO at large. It's such a welcoming, hospitable environment. And each studio feels like a family. So that's really as many people as we have around the world working under the banner of AvroKO. Each studio you go to feels like its own little family. We want to keep that culture, that familial culture going.
So it wasn't William, Christina, Adam, or Greg in particular, like one of them that was like, oh yeah, this is for me.
It wasn't. It was all of the above. It was.
They all said ghost donkey at the same time.
They all said ghost donkey at the same time.
I'm in.
And yeah.
Sign me up. I love it. Okay, so now as a leader in the industry, you, Kimberly Jackson, if you were to magically appear in front of the Kimberly Jackson you mentioned who was graduating high school in New Orleans, what advice do you have for yourself?
Good question. Be a risk taker. Push the boundaries.
Tell me more about that. Why would you give yourself that advice?
I think for me, looking back, I feel I waited a little bit to really push forward what I could do. And I needed to have a little bit more confidence in my abilities. And so, yeah.
I'm curious about that too, because I could say the same thing about my journey too, just waiting. I've done a lot of things, but I do remember moments of just like being stuck in inertia and not being able to move. What was the voice or the clarion moment that helped you kick off those like concrete shoes or whatever you were wearing, whatever you felt like that anchor was that was holding you back? What was it?
Part of it was, I think, realizing that I could have a voice and that I didn't have to kind of be on the sideline. I didn't have to forever be only listening to learn. I could start speaking up more to encourage that learning, and asking for that learning, and kind of insisting a little bit that I can do things and I need to do things. So I don't know if there's one exact moment, but
so, yeah. Well, just to learn more about that, because it does come up on a lot of these conversations. And one of the things I say in the beginning is I love shortening other people's journeys. So if you were to like to short for the benefit of others listening, and it might not have been one person or thing or moment, but
Yeah.
whatever helped you cross that threshold, was it from within or was it from without? Well, in the sense that was there someone that was like helping you get that courage, or did it come from within?
I think a little bit of both, but there was definitely um, one of my mentors definitely did help. I worked in this firm in San Francisco, and the principal there, he took a big risk. I mean, it wasn't really a big risk. I had performed, he knew I could do it. But for me, it was a big risk. He's like, put me in charge of this job. And I'd never done that before. And I didn't know what I was doing, but he's like, you can do it. You can just do it. You know? And I was like, okay. And so it was that kind of encouragement, and then being able to kind of step up into that, even though I did need a little help. I needed, somebody to come over and say, let's do it this way a little bit. But as a kind of like, as like maybe intermediate in architecture is like the job captain-ish sort of role, giving me a large amount of responsibility, more than what I would have requested at the time, more than what was happening with some of my colleagues around me. And just having that faith in me made me realize that maybe I can do this. Maybe this is the right path.
I know you can. And and then, so two-part question, like a little follow-up on that one. Do you want to give that mentor a shout out? Like, who was that?
Sure. It was Mike McCall.
Mike McCall. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
from McCall Design Group, which no longer exists. He retired, but yeah, he was definitely one of my strongest mentors
Wonderful.
when I was an up and coming architect.
And then, actually, I have two more follow-ups onto that one. How are you taking that experience of someone like kind of helping nudge you in a certain direction? How are you doing that, and how are you paying that forward to the team that you're building now?
I think you do have to take a little bit of a risk with people that you see are developing, but may need just a little bit of a push.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously you'll help mentor them, you'll watch them, you make sure that they're not drowning, but you do have to take that bit of a risk and kind of not throw them in the deep end, but kind of take them with you into the deep end, so that they can start to swim on their own.
Or maybe throw them in with just one swimming on one
maybe
arm.
one. Yeah, one arm.
keep their mouth up towards the arm with the swimming on it.
Exactly.
So it's like it's a gentle nudge out of the nest, so to speak.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, still being there to, like I said, help mentor, or help problem solve, or even sometimes they find out that that's not quite what they really wanted when you do that, which actually I think helps them as well. It allows them to see clarity in their goals, to kind of just map out their path in a better way.
Okay. And then, as a licensed architect and going through, undergrad and graduate school, and then your exam, or your exam to become a licensed
exams
architect.
Plural.
Exams.
At the time it was 8. I think now it's 5.
Wow.
But
I mean, so what helped you change or like refocus from architect? You're an architect. I'm not taking that away, but like,
no.
what helped you? What pushed you? Because there's often this dividing line between architects and interiors, right? What pushed you or pulled you into interior design, and then specifically hospitality, and is keeping you here?
Well, that's a 2-part question I can really go into. I think with architecture, one of the things that AvroKO really thrives on is the interaction between interior design and architecture. I mean, AvroKO, two of the founding partners are architects. They aren't interior designers. And a good portion of the AvroKO team is made of people who study architecture as opposed to interior design. We don't, in the course of a project, distinguish between the two. Architects, interior designers work alongside of each other. We're all designers. We're all senior designers. We don't make that distinction in our day-to-day work life. But I think the integration of both makes AvroKO's work stronger. Some people are more versed in technical stuff, some people are more versed in FF&E and picking fabrics and things like that I wasn't necessarily educated on specifically, but we get to the same place and we're educating each other. And I think that makes for stronger designs, so that each person in the studio can now do much more than they could coming in with one discipline or the other. And I think that's really important to the work that we do. As far as hospitality, I actually worked in a hotel in high school.
In New Orleans?
In New Orleans.
Is it still around? Have we heard of it?
It is still around. It's still there. It was a big giant, has a big flag on it. I was in a program for students who wanted to be in the hospitality industry. And at the time, my family history, my dad owned and operated several restaurants. So I already had a bit of hospitality industry background. And I wanted to check out what this whole hotel industry was about as a high schooler. And so my senior year of high school, I was in a program that they rotated me around to different departments in the hotel. Every quarter, we had a different department to work in. And then we also had like a side class where we had to, study and learn finance and all that kind of thing. And it intrigued me. It was really awesome. And then I put that aside to go to college and grad school and everything else in between. And then at the end of that, at some point in New York, I took a bit of a break and helped out a friend who was actually ill but owned a bar, and ended up helping her manage her bar for a couple of years. And so I've had all these little industry, wades into the other side of the industry right before I came to AvroKO.
And that's another thing that just fascinates me about hotels. If you look at them as a platform, they have so many different channels of business, and by virtue of that experience within them, from gift shop to front desk to, the pool or recreation, or there's always restaurants. There's so many things that you can do and experience, but all in serving others and meeting others where they are at that moment. And I think, I'm glad you came back. Kimberly, if people wanted to learn more about you, the team you're building in Miami, or AvroKO in general, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
For me, I think it's my LinkedIn, which is the easiest way. For AvroKO in general, which is we're always looking for people to reach out to AvroKO. We love hearing from folks. We love hearing from potential employees. I think the best way would be either LinkedIn or Instagram. Follow us on Instagram.
Great.
Like our feed.
And we'll put all that in there. And as you were talking, I was just looking at like the founding partners and leadership team page. When did Tory go to San Francisco and become the managing director? I missed the whole memo. She's awesome.
She's been there for maybe a couple of years now.
Wow. Or maybe I knew that and forgot. Or is it Alzheimer's?
Maybe just over a year.
Oh, wow. I didn't know she was out there. Anyway, that's exciting. I got to reach out to her. Well, this has been super wonderful for me. And I'm just so glad and honored that you dedicated some of your time to this and sharing your story and experience. And I can't wait to see what you're up to and how that team just continues to grow under under your guidance. So thank you so much, Kimberly, for your time and your story.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to all the listeners, because without you tuning in every week, we wouldn't be here talking to Kimberly and learning from her experience. So 1 + 1 = 5. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And Kimberly, thank you so much for sharing.